Hello, beautiful listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Psychedelics podcast. I am here with a very exciting and different guest for the show. I have Jessica here with me from DanceSafe, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this conversation with you all today because it's a totally new topic. You know, we're in season 3 or we're in the 3rd iteration of the Modern Psychedelics podcast and can only talk about healing and ceremonial psychedelics for so many episodes. And recently, if you listen to my episode 44, where I gave you some updates, I kind of told the story of how I really reconnected with nightlife and rave culture and the recreational use of psychedelics. And as you guys know, I love to share with you guys everything I'm excited about. So bringing forth a totally new topic around the recreational use of psychedelics, how we can create, safe spaces and just be the most educated and responsible recreational users for anyone out there who is interested in that. So I know you guys are going to love this. So Jessica, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lana. I'm very honored to be here. It's going to be such a pleasure. Really looking forward to diving in on all the things.
Yeah, I've been really, really looking forward to talking to you all. I was kind of crossing my fingers that someone from DanceSafe would come on for the next season. So super great that you're here. So to start
Thank you.
with, why don't you give us a little bit about DanceSafe, the organization, kind of like the mission behind it, and then also your role and what you do for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were founded about 22 years ago in the Bay Area from Emmanuel Safarios. We have recently gone on a journey to update our mission, vision, values, and principles. So it isn't quite final yet. We were promoting health and safety in the music and in the EDM community. But we have, over the past 22 years, have grown in all different genres outside of rave culture, outside of music culture, really into relating communities as well. So our new mission that we're looking at, I'm going to tell listeners that this is still being drafted a little bit, but we're more going to go into the direction of promoting health, safety, and fulfilling experience for people who use drugs in their communities. The EDM and the music community is just one of many interconnected spaces that we provide services and programming for. Um, we are primarily known for doing the drug checking in these spaces, but we are very involved in education and peer education around drugs, health, wellness, consent, and we are a chapter-based organization. We have chapters all over the United States that provide programs and services, free programs and services at different events, community events, and we have a very big online presence as well. You can, there's a lot of education, there's workshops, our social media has a lot of education as well. And yeah, I'll leave it there. And so we can not talk about everything now. We can dive into a bunch of stuff later. My role with DanceSafe is Chief Growth and Impact Officer. I carry a breadth of experience in different ecosystems, including legal, government, nonprofit, public health, healthcare, education, digital media, technology. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and criminology. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a certified Scrum Master, certified psychedelic assisted therapist. My intersecting efforts have really specialized in social entrepreneurship, organizational culture and health, criminal justice, drug policy reform, and integrative drug assisted care. I was on the board of directors for a couple of years, and I recently now, I can't believe it's almost been a year. I've transferred off of the board of directors in October of 21 And now I'm on there, one of the members of the executive team, and I am really focused on like value impact optimization, innovation, growth, sustainability, helping in all different aspects of yeah, DanceSafe's growth and innovation.
Amazing. When you were kind of like listing off all of your gifts and talents and trainings, I couldn't help but think like, wow, what a beautiful example of like putting together all of the things that you are gifted at and trained in and like using all of that in just like the most perfect, impactful way at DanceSafe and to share these messages with the world.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a long journey. Yeah, I I used to be a paralegal, and I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney for a long time, and bankruptcy really fell into my lap. And doing that work for several years on Chapter 7 and Chapter 13s for consumer clients was just a really healing experience for me, but also being in healing experiences around all aspects of people's life really brought me and made a shift from wanting to be an attorney and making a shift into social work. I realized that the impact that I could have from social work was much different than the impact that I could have being an attorney inside of the legal system. And with such a like a versatile and dynamic background, DanceSafe has been able to provide an opportunity and like a really fertile ground to bring everything that I've done in my past and put it together. And be able to do it for something that I'm so passionate about and that I love so much. Just as it's been a huge blessing in my life for sure.
Wow. Wow. I'm even more excited to talk to you now. Now that we've kind of laid that groundwork and yeah, so good to see where you've come and really speaks to like, yeah, the personal journey and just following it and continuing to, yeah, just follow what lights you up and what you're good at and seeing where it takes you. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. So, I really want to start this conversation with the idea of psychedelic exceptionalism, which is something that I learned about in Dr. Carl Hart's book, Drug Use for Grown-ups, which I know that you are also a fan of Dr. Carl Hart's work. We were just chatting before hitting record. And yeah, I really want to start here. It's really this idea that, you know, for listeners who don't know, it's this idea that like the spiritual and therapeutic use of psychedelics is superior and, you know, should be more accepted than the recreational use of psychedelics, and that the recreational use is kind of like wrong and inferior, and that these two really belong in different categories. And I must say that I definitely subscribed to this when I was deep in my ayahuasca journey. And it's been really nice to come to this place of being a little more well-rounded and seeing that there totally is a place and space for both, and that both can be extremely meaningful and fulfilling experiences. The caveat, of course, is that we must, you know, do both experiences responsibly, which really starts from education. When it comes to proper education, we're really up against decades of the drug war narrative and really just a lot of straight up information about drug use that's been fueled by the war on drugs. And my question for you, Jessica, is, you know, at DanceSafe, with the work that you do in educating and sharing information with people, what are some of the main myths and misconceptions around the recreational drug use that DanceSafe is really working on dismantling and setting straight?
Yeah, thank you. It's a big question. And I did want to touch on Carl Hart's work a bit. Just phenomenal body of work, phenomenal book for anybody who is looking to deepen into this. Just an amazing educator, amazing movement builder. But I did want to mention one thing from like dance safe perspectives. And, you know, I do understand that this is a psychedelic focus show, but Carl Hart is also not just talking about like the therapeutic and the ceremonial use of psychedelics versus non. He really deeps into this myth between good and bad drugs, whether it's psychedelics, and the psychedelic exceptionalism can be boiled down to this myth that psychedelics are better than other drugs. Psychedelics are better than heroin, and heroin is extremely stigmatized. Uh, but drugs are drugs, psychoactive drugs are drugs, and every drug has a different risk profile and a different benefit profile. So how do we minimize those risks and how do we maximize those benefits? It's one of the things that we at DanceSafe are trying to change the cultural narrative on around what is harm reduction and what we call harm reduction. Harm reduction, part of that is meeting people where they're at. And that's one of the reasons why we continue to use harm reduction. It has become a more mainstream term. People are familiar with what it entails, but it's also inherently saying that something is harmful, where that just is not accurate all the time. Everything has a different risk profile, a different benefit profile. So we're really trying to move away from harm reduction into, and the myth, I guess you could say, of harm reduction into risk reduction and benefit maximization. The other part that is interesting around Carl Hart's work is his finding in the research that he has done over many, many years is that 75 to 90% of drug users of even the most stigmatized drugs, methamphetamine, heroin, do not meet DSM criteria for problematic or chaotic use. So that's really profound, especially when you're looking at recreational drug use, because people have been using drugs forever. For all different sorts of uses, whether that is for healing, whether that's ceremony, whether it's creativity, coping, fulfillment, happiness, whatever that is. And the recreational use, which is non-ceremonial, non-therapeutic, but recreational use is by far the largest body of users that the world has.
Mm.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way. Yeah, that's so true. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So his work is pretty profound, but with the psychedelic exceptionalism, it is really, it's more around destigmatizing and the re-education around a good drug versus a bad drug. And then the risk reduction, benefit maximization, and that this very large myth around drug users being a certain way, the stigmatized language around that, not even good, bad, but clean, dirty. So the next part that I'll mention, I think from DanceSafe's perspective, that is a top line is the myth that adulteration or that I guess you could say that it's not going to happen to me. Adulteration of substances, where it is either so adulteration, there is something in your substance that isn't communicated that's in there. For example, you expect to have ketamine and there is fentanyl in your ketamine. That is adulteration. No one communicated that to you. And misrepresentation would be you expected to acquire MDMA, but you acquired MDA. There is a myth that adulteration can't happen to people, but we are not in a necessarily in an overdose crisis, is what we're saying. We're really trying to shift that narrative, and you could call it a myth a little bit, but that's really stretching it. But that we're really in an adulteration crisis. And this is really a community issue. It's a people issue, and it's that education that you were talking about, where everyone needs to be educated that it's adulteration can happen in any drug that is acquired through underground markets, and really any source that is non-regulated.
Yeah. Wow. So many good things in there. Like I definitely just learned a lot. So I want to go back to that statistic you gave. Was it 70 to 85% of people aren't problematic or chaotic users?
75 to 90.
75 to 90% of recreational drug users do not engage in problematic or chaotic use of psychedelics. So, looking at that other 25 to 10% of people who do have problematic use is a whole other conversation. And by no way does this conversation imply that those people don't exist. Like, yes, substance abuse and problematic use is totally a thing. And perhaps I'll have another guest on in the future to talk about that. But today we're really focusing on this segment of people, as Carl Hartwick calls them, grown-ups, and like the caveat that he gives to that, but like how people can really use these substances recreationally in a way that enhances our lives and without, problematic or chaotic use. So I guess on that note, can you speak to some of those like early signs of dependency or early signs of problematic and chaotic use that people can look out for? Because it definitely is a problem. And I think if you are engaging in recreational drug use, like you are still dealing with drugs and like things can go wrong, right? And it's really important to kind of be educated on like those early signs. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, that's also a really big question. And there is this spectrum, I guess you could say, of use that is there's a big difference between use, misuse, abuse, and dependence. And every body is different, and the way that problematic or chaotic use may manifest or may show symptoms or signs of it can be completely different. And it's not necessarily related, even though it can be, to the frequency or the dosage. But we also need to understand that people have a different spectrum of tolerance. So generally, I would look out for signs and, more look out for signs of shifting relationships, um, different sorts of connection, higher risk behavior, and changes in sustainability and functioning in their everyday lives.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. So I want to shift into some harm reduction protocols because or I'm sorry, let me adapt the new term, the risk reduction and benefit maximization. Love that. Protocols for some commonly used recreational psychedelics. So, well, I mean, the first two that I want to talk to aren't, I mean, they're not traditional psychedelics, but they produce psychedelic-like effects and are huge in nightlife culture. So, my personal favorite, the first one I ever tried at the ripe age of 20, MDMA. Can you tell us a little bit about, just like an overview of some protocols that people can follow to reduce risk and maximize benefits when taking MDMA? Let's start there.
Yeah, so it may shift the conversation just a little bit here, but I think that there's like a foundation of just cross-sectional, um, you could say, like, tips for all substances. One of the first ones, and I can list off, I'll just list off some of them. One of the first ones is the buddy system. Always travel with a friend, be with a friend, share in what you're doing, be vulnerable in what your dosage is, how much you have taken, when have you dosed, sharing experiences in the past on what may come up for you, especially around different substances. We really we believe that there is no like bad experience, especially around psychedelics. You can have a challenging experience, but there isn't like a bad trip. And having someone around you or a support system or people around you that can help include, different aspects and deepening into, the people is not only the setting, but also your set. Having that support system around you can have very, very positive benefits to both set and setting. We also believe in like chilling out and taking a break. If you are exerting a lot of energy around dancing for several hours, there's a risk for dehydration and heat exhaustion. So just cool down, which brings me into the next one around hydration and electrolytes. Make sure that you're drinking enough water. We generally recommend drinking about a bottle of water per hour with supplements in it. At our DanceSafe booths, we do provide electrolytes, Gatorade, water. We also provide condoms, earplugs, sunscreen. Just things to take care of you, take care of your body. The next one is knowing your dosage and source as well. I had mentioned earlier the difference between MDMA and MDA. It's not that either one is better than the other one or worse than the other one, or there's more harm in it. Where the education comes in is the difference between dosage between those, the difference between effects, the difference between duration. So definitely understanding and do psychoeducation around the substance that you're intending to consume, what cross reactions may be around other substances you may consume, and then also knowing the source. Has it come from a regulated source? Were you able to, like here in Denver, are you able to walk into a cannabis shop and buy something, or is it from an underground market? And then around this, it's start low, go slow. You can always take more. You cannot take less. And we also try to say that less can be more as well. The next, I would say number 5 is test it. We do say test it before you ingest it. Education. Know what you're putting in your body. I can't put out direct percentages, but unless it's from a regulated source, there is a high probability that there may be an adulterant in it, even if it's MDMA cut with non-psychoactive substances, or ketamine cut with something else. We'll get in a little bit around this as well, around the reagent test kits that we have, the fentanyl test strips that we have, but also doing confirmatory testing and sending it into advanced testing technology like drugsdata.org, or we have an FTIR machine. But you have to run on the assumption that there may be an adulterant on here, and that there may be a high probability that there is something. So test it before you ingest it. Just be cautious when mixing substances.
Can I interrupt you for a
Oh,
just question on the
please.
testing?
Yes,
If
yes.
people get their stuff from the same kind of person or the same source, should they constantly be testing with each new, I guess, stash that they pick up?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm a firm believer that, we have nutritional facts on the back of every single food item that we have. And there's different batch numbers, right?
Right.
I believe that this is something that just needs to be normalized. Even if it is coming from the same supplier, the very best practice is to test every time you acquire something.
Hmm.
And that's something, this is a lot of what we're going around in DanceSafe is not only educating consumers, but educating suppliers. There has been experiences and stories that I can tell where the suppliers don't know because there's a long lineage and line of command that can come in that. And the person, depending on what level and what type of quantity that you're buying, are you retail or are you wholesale? But most people in recreational spaces, they're buying from most of the time street dealers, and the street dealers they don't know or have the education and know that they may be selling MDMA versus MDMA or MDA, for example, and they really may think it's MDMA. So there's been times where we've educated suppliers, and that exact example has happened. It was MDA instead of MDMA, and they had to figure out where up in the supply chain something was going wrong, and they
Mm.
fixed it. They did end up fixing it. So, going back to this is a community responsibility. And it's very radical to say that it's not only on, we believe, and I believe it's not only on the consumer, even though more of the responsibility is like falling on testing in that way. But we're trying to shift that narrative and push that narrative that suppliers should be doing that too. And there are some suppliers and certain cartels who are coloring their different drugs.
Hmm.
We have to understand that. And feel free to stop me at any point. I can ramble and,
Yeah, no, flow with it.
but yeah, thank you. There are certain cartels that we have to remember that there are folks, their drug of choice is fentanyl. So we really need to understand the destigmatization and the messaging around the programs and services that even we provide. If something does test positive for fentanyl, okay, now what? It's not an immediate reaction around, oh, this is bad. It is okay. It did test for fentanyl. And what are the next steps? What do we do from here? What are the options? And weighing those risks and benefits so people can make the best decisions for themselves.
Well, it's only
But
from that
there,
place of like, okay, what do we do from here that we can actually come to solutions and like solve
yeah,
problems instead of,
yeah,
um, just being stuck in a place of judgment,
yeah.
right?
I believe, and this comes from like an entrepreneurial background on, fall in love with the problem and don't fall in love with the solution.
Mm.
Because there is going to be a lot of solutions, and a lot of solutions are going to cascade around this. And there are a spectrum of different ideals and opinions that people have on solutions. Even in the psychedelic community, there's a huge difference between legalization, regulation, decriminalization, incrementalism. And it can be very polarizing in what people think what the best solution is. So being able to figure out what that problem is and falling in love with that problem, which sounds weird and counterintuitive, we can keep our minds open to better solutions as
Mm-hmm.
well. With DanceSafe, there we haven't come out with a organizational stance on incrementalism and decriminalization versus legalization, because there is that spectrum, and there are just there's just this, we just haven't come out with it yet.
Yeah.
And we're in a
Same.
lot of conversations internally. Yeah. We,
Yeah.
God, we're not alone in that. It's very validating because,
It's super nuanced and like, it's all valid.
yeah,
There's room for all of it.
it's not a either or, it's a both and then some.
Yeah, totally.
So we do know, and we do believe that, the prohibition from the drug war and the drug war prohibition is the driving factor to the crisis and the higher risks that we have as drug users.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I was just going to mention the cartels. There are people who they want to purchase, they want to acquire fentanyl. It's not necessarily I'm seeking out heroin. It's I am seeking out fentanyl. And there are some cartels who are starting to color their different drugs, not to market to kids. That is a myth. That is another myth. There is just not substantiated evidence in all of the studies, in the studies that we know of and that we have read. People are not marketing to kids, but they're coloring their drugs to make sure that the drug users are more aware of what they're doing, and the different colors, it's less of a risk that they can be mixed together.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So let's bring it back to the protocols.
Yep.
So did you have any more that you wanted to say in general, or do you want to move to the drug specific ones?
Yep, I will. I will definitely just say, I mentioned be cautious when mixing substances, get proper sleep and nutrition, protect your hearing, which is very, very important. And then know your rights. And if you are going to, around relationships, around sex, just make sure to, there are harm reduction and protection, but also conversations that go around with that, especially when using drugs. Consent, what does it look like to have consent, reestablish consent in those situations?
Yeah. So much good stuff in there. Like if we as like a collective of recreational drug users all follow those protocols, I mean, like the space would be in like society would be in such a different place, right? So important. So let's move into, and maybe we can just spend like a few minutes on each one. So like, let's start with MDMA. What's like the number 1 and 2 thing maybe that people should know about MDMA?
I would say a very important one, that's kind of a phenomenon, is folks losing the magic, is what they call it, on MDMA. The phenomenon is typically seen in users that have very high dosages, or I would say high dosages repeatedly over time.
What's a high dosage with MDMA?
So I would say a typical dosage is 120 milligrams. In the MDMA studies with MAPS, they've gone through different dosages. But they start with 120 milligrams, and then there is a 60 milligram booster. So that's 180. That is a fairly high dose.
Hmm.
Anything above that, you could consider a higher dose. And there, in the 90s, like I grew up, um, I mean, I'll just show folks this.
What is it? Oh,
It's a red Mitsubishi, and it's my paperweight. So, I grew up in a time that, and I started uh, taking MDMA. My first MDMA pill was when I was 14.
wow.
And this is what really, and I'd done a lot of drugs before then, but at 14, I took my first MDMA pill. And relative to all the rest of the drugs, I didn't try all of them. I still haven't tried all of them. There are so many to try, but
You don't have to
it
try all of
really,
them.
I
Right?
don't know. I'm not. I'm very curious. I'm a very
Yeah.
curious person. But it really changed my trajectory, and I knew then that there was something to this.
Hmm.
Um, but back then it wasn't uncommon to take three triple stack Mitsubishis in a night. Their drug checking was around. DanceSafe actually started. I actually have a very cute um, it's the first business card of DanceSafe.
Wow, it's super cute. Oh, it's so
Isn't
like
it cute?
90s rave culture with those pants.
Yes, I
What
think
did they
cool.
call those
Um,
pants? The oh,
Jinkos,
Jinkos,
fat
yes.
pants, kick girls. Yeah, I used
Yeah,
to wear all
super
those.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so with the
So
I want to go back to the dosing with MDMA. I've
yeah,
heard, and maybe you can confirm this, that you shouldn't redose more than once on MDMA if you do. Is that accurate?
so yeah, and that's where I was actually going with this.
Okay, cool.
I, and look, this is a personal practice for people, but the risk of increased the risk of increased probability of like neurotoxicity on redosing becomes higher.
Yes.
Um, so we recommend uh, your experiences to 90 days to every 4 months, and that would be like three or four times a year.
Yeah.
But again, this isn't a hard and fast fact, right? This isn't. But that is typically where people have found the benefit maximization in it, where they don't lose the magic or that sparkle, the magic, the sparkle, the specialness, the intensity,
Hmm.
and the very unique properties and experience that MDMA can give. And
Yeah.
with redosing, we I would recommend not redosing more than once in an experience. And you also have, you could say, like, diminishing returns when you redose.
Hmm.
Your brain only has so much serotonin, so when you redose, you will get effects, but it won't be as intense as that first dose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Great. Yeah. MDMA, I feel like is such a great place to start because it is such a beautiful substance that has given so many people just like a breath of fresh air in their lives. And, I always say it's
Yeah.
like pretty much a guaranteed good, like, I feel like MDMA is like a good time most of the time, as long as it's like properly sourced and you're following these harm reduction protocols. But yeah, it's, the most popular one out there
Mhm.
probably that people are using. So yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. And let's move
You're
into
welcome.
ketamine.
Yeah. What are you most interested on knowing? Do you want to start with like dosage, or
Yeah,
is there
maybe we
any?
could
Just
touch
want to come back
on
to you.
dosing because I know a lot of people are afraid of the K-hole and aren't sure really
Mm.
how to like use ketamine in a safe way that isn't like too intense. I've recently started dabbling with ketamine recreationally, and I say that
Hmm.
it's like kind of walking, it's kind of like walking on a slant all night.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked this question because I'm really glad you brought up the K-hole. I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Love it. So same with, growing up, most of my historical use with ketamine has been recreational. It has been powdered form, snorted, which for people doing ketamine and they are snorting it, make sure that you have personal snorting devices, a spoon, use a straw, a post-it note. We also sell tutors on our website. Just a little harm reduction there. But I grew up being very afraid of the K-hole. And a lot of people are. But that's another myth that we can talk about. The fear and the stigmatization around the K-hole. Um, since with ketamine assisted psychotherapy, I have worked with Wholeness Center up in Fort Collins with Dr. Scott Shannon. I'm currently involved in the Integrative Psychiatry Institute out in Boulder, Colorado with Will Vandeveer and Sarah Gale and other amazing practitioners. And I was the course assistant for a year-long psychedelic assisted psychotherapy program through IPI that's focused on MDMA, ketamine, LSD, and psilocybin. I am now really just focused on the ketamine experiential weekends there. So it is in a therapeutic space, which is ketamine assisted psychotherapy. And there obviously are different routes of administration with ketamine. Most of the time it is snorted. But there's also in the therapeutic space, it can be, there's also sprays, nasal sprays that you can get prescribed. Then there are troches, so oral administration, and then there's also IV and IM. And the dosages are much different than being on the dance floor, you could say, and still wanting to be able to move and dance and I would just say be able to like move and dance, where in these therapeutic spaces, depending on the diagnosis and the indication and the goals of treatment, whether it's PTSD, depression, there's a range of different dosages where it can be, some people call it like psycholytic versus psychedelic. But when with the IMs, and usually the IV, you are going into a K-hole is,
Intentionally.
what it is intentionally,
Yeah.
right? But
it's pretty hard to get there though, unless you're like snorting quite a large quantity, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I think ketamine has you can create a high tolerance for yourself with ketamine.
Yes.
One of the risks with it is that it does have a higher risk of people abusing it or becoming dependent on it. It has some serious physical symptoms that can come along with that within like your urinary tract and cognitively, so it does have a higher risk profile, but the benefits of it are if taken with intention and knowing, setting and anything. But I can go on, but I'll push it back to the K-hole part of it is that we are, they're dispelling that myth around that. And so I think that the dosage can range from a small bump of 10 milligrams to 60, 30 to 60 milligrams. But 100 milligrams may put one person into what we are, calling a K-hole or, ketamine space, a journey, which is highly psychedelic. And other people may feel those effects. And you can see this in the therapeutic space where it is being closely measured and monitored, that the folks' sensitivity and at the rate they metabolize ketamine or different substances is completely different. So know your body, you know.
Start low and slow. The thing
Yeah,
with ketamine is that
especially with ketamine.
it's short acting, right? So there's not
Yep.
like this 40-minute, hour and 20-minute onset. You can kind of feel the effects
Yeah.
pretty quickly. So
Five to
it is a
15
lot.
minutes,
Yeah, it's a lot easier to start
even
very,
quicker.
very, 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 very slow, like
Yeah.
very low. And there's a
Hmm.
building effect with ketamine, right? Like if you're taking it throughout the night, it kind of builds. The effect kind of gets stronger
Yeah.
throughout the night. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I would, there's also this, I think that's very important with, starting low, going slow, what you're saying. And, and again, ev- everybody is different, but
Yeah.
if you are beginning out in this, wait a half hour, 45 minutes, wait a full hour if you need to,
Hmm.
and make sure you have folks with
Yeah.
you. Make sure you have folks with you. And then we do recommend avoid alcohol.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you
Definitely
mentioned that.
avoid alcohol.
What can people do if like they are, enjoying ketamine in a recreational setting and they do happen to, like
Hmm.
there's been times where I've been like, wow, I really
Yeah.
can't walk. Like I
Yeah.
cannot move from this play.
Yeah.
Like I can't move from this
Yeah.
position. I guess I'm just
Yeah.
stuck here for the next 20 minutes. Or,
Yeah.
what if they do start to feel that physical discomfort? Like what are some coping mechanism strategies that they can work with, like breathing,
Yeah.
like what can people do?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. And these have been some of my, just some memorable moments, even in mine. And there is, it's interesting because even in recreational spaces, and we can talk about, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but there's a lot of benefits, but a lot of healing and a lot of connection and a lot of therapeutic value in social settings and community and recreational spaces as well. But I think that this really comes down to just the same in therapeutic or even ceremonial spaces. It's that prep.
Hmm.
It is that prep. It is that psychoeducation around, the people that you're with and the container that's going to hold you in these moments. People need to talk about this and be able to watch out for one another on when this may happen, and be able to, just have a good eye out and have, you could say have someone's back in
Yeah.
this instance.
Yeah.
And
There's
so
really
I would say,
nothing. Sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say, like, there's really nothing glorified or cool about overdoing it. Like, there really isn't. There's
No,
no need to do it.
no,
It's just going to ruin your
right. There isn't.
experience.
And ketamine is also something that, it more doesn't mean better, especially, with benefit maximization, if you're looking at, in all different aspects. But going back to breathing exercises, if you're a yoga practitioner, having someone to be able to hold your hand when you need it, but making sure that you talk to the people that you're with, where you're like, if I end up in a space and I end up getting scared, especially if this is, a first time journeying or experiencing in that like depths of ketamine space and unintentionally, which can bring a lot of fear and be very scary to people. Just making sure you have someone with you, making sure that if you are on a dance floor, having someone with you that can move you away,
Hmm.
into a spot where you're not going to roll over and hurt yourself or anything like that. And I think that a big psychoeducation, sorry, I got something in my eye. A big psychoeducation is the effects and the conversation around the that this is going to be temporary, and being able to, and it's a tough, it could be a tough spot to be in, especially if it happened unintentionally, if for the first time, because it is a disassociative, right? You can go out, have an out of body experience, and you go out of your thinking brain into this observing brain. And there's this, like, that ego disillusion that can happen with it. So you may end up saying, okay, I know that this is going to be temporary, but then you know, you disassociate, and there can be a lot of fear in there. But I think the more people can do, again, the education, and destigmatizing and the re-education around the K-hole would have huge benefit if that should happen
Yeah.
unintentionally in somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Great. Yeah. Yeah. I think we covered a lot there with ketamine recreationally. Such a beautiful one. But also, yeah, be really, really careful with it, guys. And, as Jessica mentioned, that potential for harm and addiction and substance abuse is a bit higher than the other ones. So yeah, glad we got to talk about that. So the last two I want to touch on is LSD and mushrooms. I don't know if we want to group these together. Like for me, yeah, LSD is like a once in a blue moon, a few times a year thing, because every time I have LSD recreationally, I'm like, I'm good for a while. Like it's always just like such a nice time. So maybe we can touch on that. And I think like touching on, I think headspace, right, is so important for both of these. So maybe we can touch on that and any other things that you feel like is important to highlight to really, yeah, use these responsibly and safely recreationally.
Yeah. I like what you touched on there too. Like, again, everybody is different. But having a support system, like LSD, it is a commitment. It's a much longer commitment.
About 10
It could
hours
be,
for people
yeah,
out there.
up to
Yeah.
12. Some people who are sensitive to it,
Yeah.
it's definitely a commitment. And there can be, um, trips can sometimes be frightening. They can be challenging. They can induce extreme anxiety and panic. There can be flashbacks. There can come up. I mean, and I think this is with all psychedelics and different drugs, and but it can bring up a lot emotionally and
Hmm.
spiritually, and having folks with you who can help hold you in those challenging spaces, I think is the most vital, one of the most vital risk reducing um, care that you can have. I'm not sure if you agree.
Yeah, what's coming to mind is like usually it's more of a festival thing for me. I don't do mushrooms recreationally anymore, but one thing that people can do in like a festival environment is like seeing if there is like a harm reduction or a sanctuary space set up, such as DanceSafe. I know we don't have DanceSafe in Canada, but we have like other very local, smaller organizations that set up at festivals. So just like keeping that in mind and knowing like, okay, if things do go wrong and things do start going downhill, like I know where I can go to be safe. Being with someone who is maybe more experienced, like you said, is nice. And just
Yeah.
I think for me, like if there's any inkling of like I'm not in a good headspace right now, I know right off the bat that like it's not the time for LSD or mushrooms in a
Yeah.
recreational setting. Like doing
Yeah.
that
And
self-screening.
yeah, and this is something like with DanceSafe coming and connecting with us and having some of those conversations, especially beforehand, can be very, very helpful. We can talk about those things. Especially in a festival environment, in a rave environment, in a social setting, uh, it can be very overwhelming very quickly
Hmm.
for
Yes.
people. DanceSafe actually
Lots of
does
energy.
not provide. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I did want to note that DanceSafe doesn't provide sanctuary spaces. We are a place where you can come and talk, but depending on the person and what may be needed, or if there is a challenging experience happening, we work very closely in festival environments and event environments in like integrative care teams. We've got medical, we have sanctuary spaces. Sometimes medical and sanctuary are even more integrated. We've got security and rangers, us. So um, uh, in the US, we've got a couple of different organizations. The main one that people know of is Zendo Project, um, which was a part of MAPS. My understanding is they are moving in the direction of being their own nonprofit. And then I know, yeah, so really what I'm trying to say, and not going into detail about that because I will wander, is that we don't provide the sanctuary spaces, but other people do, but within like this integrative care. And that is something to know. If you are in a communal space like this, figuring out beforehand and having that knowledge, looking at the map. And I know that may feel very nebulous if you're in a circumstance where or in an experience where you may need help, but that's where that support system may be able to come in. Knowing where to find that, knowing where to go, but absolutely understanding where the different services are beforehand. And that's with every, I would say that is with every substance, but LSD is definitely one that can have an increased risk of like a challenging experience, especially because of the duration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with that with my personal experience. LSD is the only one that I've had like a challenging time with. And that's usually because I went into it with a mindset that needed to be looked at. So it just kind of forces you
Yeah.
to. So the last thing I want to know about LSD and even mushrooms is toxicity. From my understanding, it's pretty low for both. And then is there a lower risk for adulterants with both of these as well?
Great questions. Yes. Um, yes on the neurotoxicity. Um, and uh, deaths. That's also a big one. No
Much
known
lower.
deaths. Yeah. Um, and with the what was the second portion of
The
it? Sorry.
adulterants.
Yes. Okay. So there is if but we can't say that it can't happen. There was what is I would say that if we're looking at a big myth and a big topic of conversation right now is fentanyl adulteration in these substances. Um, there is, as far as we know, we have not seen data or a confirmed source of fentanyl in LSD, cannabis, psilocybin, and that does not mean that it hasn't happened or it can't happen. So we can't say um, for for certainty. Um, and the Yeah, so I will just stop there. And there are other adulterants that can. I'm just trying to find, and I'm not seeing it, and I apologize. Um, yeah, I will stop there for the fentanyl, and then
Yeah,
with LSD, one of the novel drugs, which is 25I NBOME. Uh, there's and other research chemicals um, that we don't know much about have been sold as LSD in the past few years, and taking taking these chemicals just as any other novel substance it does have a higher risk profile, and you can't know the dosage and the toxicity profile or the effects, which can become life threatening. So that's something that is very important to know. And even, that comes back to this myth around, LSD is always going to be safe. Test it before you ingest it. And we've got MDMA specific reagent testing kits, ketamine specific testing kits, LSD specific testing kits. The LSD actually tests for the endal structure. So the LSD will also detect the endal structure, excuse me, in LSD, psilocybin, DMT, melatonin. That's what we use on our demos. So.
Cool. Wow. I'm just like all the information sinking in. With dosing for LSD, what's like a good dose to start with, like a medium dose and a be aware of getting to this point dose? I usually just take like one tab and I'm good, and it like rides me for a very long time. But yeah, would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, and I'll just speak generally as well. A single square of water or drop of liquid, it usually contains between 80 and 150. A typical dose is between 100 and 200, so really depending on the tab. I would recommend going on the lower end for your first time. People, you can, if you want to do heroic doses, you can. But again, I think it goes back to this start low, go slow, maybe learning the landscape about it a little bit.
Don't start with the heroic dose.
I mean, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, don't even maybe go there, depending on who you are and where you're at.
And I mean, but depending on setting, but we believe in, it's autonomy and self-determination. So educate yourself and make the best decision for yourself.
Yeah.
But start on the lower end. And just see the effects, and you can, I'll just stop there.
Great. Okay. This is awesome. I think that, recreational users are going to gain so much from this conversation already. So grateful to have you again. So you touched on fentanyl. What's the deal with it? I'm very misinformed about this, so I'm excited to learn, what's the deal with it? What's going on with it? We hear so much about it. What do people need to know about fentanyl?
Yeah, and we've touched on quite a bit of it. I would say the main thing is a couple of main things, a couple of top lines. It is increasing in different sources, different drugs. It is not uncommon to have fentanyl be positive or test positive.
So hold on, back up. Fentanyl is a opiate?
Yes, it's yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, it is an opiate. But it's just much more potent.
Okay.
And there's a spectrum of opiates. This happens to be, and there's also fentanyl, has different analogs, with different, potency as well. Fentanyl with the potency, it has a higher risk of being fatal.
Okay.
At very, very small or even, grain of sand doses.
Crazy.
Microscopic, you could almost say. And,
but people use it recreationally, so would those doses, or even the medical doses, I guess, because it's used medically, correct?
Yep. And there's a difference
would those
between
be very,
fentanyl
very,
and
are those very, very small doses then?
They can be small, but then you're also looking at analog, right? Carfentanil is, it can be highly fatal, or it can be fatal at very, very minute doses.
Wow.
So it depends on which analog of fentanyl that you may have. But it's a really good point to note that fentanyl is used medicinally, and people are, people do seek out fentanyl as a drug of choice, and the you do use a typical dose is less, and this is general. A typical dose is less if you're looking at like fentanyl versus heroin. The dose is going to be different, and that is something that may be a benefit to somebody where their tolerance or needs off of heroin. And this is just one example of heroin. Fentanyl is more potent and it may be cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about like the, nightlife culture and unwanted fentanyl. What do people know? Like obviously test your drugs. You have the fentanyl test strips. Maybe you can talk a little bit about
Yep.
that at DanceSafe and just like anything people need to know and can do to avoid, unwanted fentanyl
Yeah,
in their stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say absolutely test it before you ingest it. One of the most important things to know about fentanyl is the chocolate chip cookie effect. And that one side of a sample can have a fatal dose. The other side of the sample may not have a fatal dose. It just isn't distributed equally. Um, and so it's very best to test everything that you intend to consume. That can create challenges depending on the drug and or the or route of administration. Um, for example, if you were to test MDMA for fentanyl with our fentanyl test strips, you could dilute your entire dose based on the dilution ratio. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. According to the dilution ratio, if you were going to take 120 milligrams, you could dilute all of that into water, and then you could just drink the water that way. If you are testing cocaine, for example, and you plan to snort the cocaine, then you're going to have to recover that somehow. And there are
Uh,
recovery methods.
okay. So
Um,
with the testing kits, the
yep.
sample that you use can actually be consumed after you test it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. The sample, depending on what it is, right? Like
Yeah.
the cocaine, you're going to have to recover that, but you can put it in a Pyrex dish at a certain temperature in the oven and watch it and then turn it back into a powder and
Okay. I
evaporate
didn't
the
know that.
water
I
out of that.
always tossed it.
I know. No, you can. Yeah.
Wow.
It's just
That's good
water.
to know. Yeah, that's good to know. Okay, cool. Okay. Anything else that people should know about fentanyl before we move into just a different topic?
I don't know if you want me to say anything about more about the fentanyl test strips, or if you want to talk about if we're going to be talking a little bit more about the drug checking technologies that we have. Totally up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Go in. Feel free to go into that.
Yeah, awesome. And the only thing, just test it before you ingest it, and just test it before you ingest it. So
If you
the
get one key takeaway from this interview, say it with me now.
test
Test it before you
it
ingest
before
it.
you ingest it. Um,
Yeah, tell us about
uh,
the reagent kits and what you guys are doing with that at DanceSafe.
awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple different drug checking technologies. One of them is a reagent test kit. They are presumptive testing. They will they're able to provide insight on presence, not potency or purity. And they come in little dropper bottles, and the chemicals within the dropper bottles react to other chemicals. So one reagent and or a combination of reagents will be able to provide insight, usually depending on the series that you use. It can it can share that a substance that you are intending may be in the substance, and or it can, using different reagents, it may tell you what adulterants what may be in there. So you can purchase these online. And it comes with a very detailed instruction sheet that includes not only the reagent test kits, but also the fentanyl test strips. And how it works, and I'm trying to verbalize this and not show it for folks who are just listening. You would, for MDMA, for example, it uses 3 of our reagents, and you would take the like a pinhead size sample. You would take 3 of those and put them on a white spot plate, and then you would use 1 reagent on each of those. One of the reagents is going to, and the combination of them, I won't go into too much detail, the combination of them will provide insight in your sample on the difference between MDMA, MDA, cathinones, if there may be methamphetamine in it. So you're able to provide insight. It is a less sophisticated technology than, say, like a GCMS that drugsdata.org uses. And that was actually started by DanceSafe, and now it's run by Arrowhead. And it is the only DEA licensed laboratory that you can send in your sample anonymously, and then they post all of the results online. We have an FTIR machine that we have purchased, which is we also bring this to festivals as well. This is it's a spectrometer, and essentially it tests your drugs with a laser. Every substance has a different fingerprint. We are able to we're able to compare the different fingerprints. If there is 5% over a substance in a sample, so there is a sensitivity threshold to it, but anything that's over 5% in the sample, we can run those fingerprints and compare them to several different libraries. And not only will it tell you the presence of a substance if it's in that library, but also approximate percentages, which is very helpful, which is something that you would not be able to get at all with the reagents. But the reagents are a very, very, very accessible way to do at-home testing as well. And then we also have the fentanyl test strips, which are essentially repurposed urine test strips. And we have recently released our own branded DanceSafe fentanyl test strips in partnership with WHPM. These are yellow fentanyl test strips. We were using BTNX test strips. That has been the industry standard, especially in harm reduction purposes. But the BTNX strips had a increased risk of causing false positive with methylated drugs. So the dilution ratio needed to be different. We have a superior antibody. We also, or let me back up. We have a exclusivity distribution agreement with WHPM for us to distribute these throughout the world, if we can, depending on regulations and laws and customs. And we have pricing. We're really trying to change the industry and make these accessible to people in the community, make these accessible to social services and community and university. So we have very transparent pricing around that for those, which is about 45 cents per strip, which is like less than half of what it was. So it's been really changing the game there. These strips have and all of this is being partnered with where people are using these in different university studies, different healthcare studies, in community settings, such as like in New York at community drug checking sites, overdose prevention sites. So we're getting a lot of data coming back. All to say, we had a superior antibody in these fentanyl test strips that do not cause the false positive on these drugs. So that is just amazing news, and we were very excited to be able to launch this at the National Harm Reduction Conference out in Puerto Rico in October. So that was really exciting. So I'll just sum that up. That we've got reagent test kits that can help provide insight on the presence of a substance or different adulterants in a substance, ranging from, I would just say, ranging the spectrum of all different drugs, fentanyl test strips, and an FTIR machine.
Amazing. Congrats. That's incredible. And yeah, if you guys are listening and you are, I mean, people have been doing substances and will continue to do substances, and there's a reason for that. It's because we have a right to, and it's a human desire to change our consciousness. And that's why we're having this conversation. So if you're part of that group and you are using these substances, please, 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 please do it safely. Go get some test kits, test your stuff, continue to get educated. Like, don't just stop here. Don't just stop at this interview. Go read Carl Hart's book. Go check out DanceSafe's websites. You guys have so much information out there, and like really empower yourself. And yeah, let's show the world that recreational drugs can be done in a beautiful, safe, responsible, empowered way. And let's freaking crush this war on drugs. Yeah, such good work that you guys are doing. I would hate to, we're really deep into this interview, and if you guys are still with us, thank you for staying with us. I would hate to end this interview, Jessica, without getting just your take on the sacredness of nightlife and really like the pulse behind why you guys are doing what you're doing, which is really like preserving safe nightlife culture. And like for me personally, rave culture and nightlife culture, electronic music, where this type of beautiful, emotive, expressive, incredible music is just best experienced and enjoyed with these substances, right? Like they have been some of my just absolute peaks in life. And my take on drugs is like or psychedelics is that they really allow us to experience peak experiences in life, whether you're in a ceremony and you're experiencing like your peak fears and like your peak sadness and your peak emotions and you're like healing, or whether you're at a festival and experiencing peak joy and peak happiness and peak connection with yourself and your friends and the music, right? Like they're just so beautiful, psychedelics, and these like peak joys and highs in nightlife culture at festivals is an important part of the human experience. So I want to hear from you. Like, why is it important to keep nightlife, raves, festivals safe and going? And also, like, what is the responsibility of each party goer to create these safe and loving spaces and to like really contribute to that?
Yeah, great question. I'll start this off by just sharing a little bit about like my MSW program. At the end of it, I had to write my recommendations and share my recommendations for like the future of social work as well. And again, for listeners, MSW, so it was a master's in social work. And one of the things that I had recommended in there, because there is this sacredness and there is this benefit maximization that can happen, that we need to also understand that drugs can have so much therapeutic benefit and ceremony and sacredness in social settings, in nightlife settings. It caused quite a wave in my program, where the chair of the department ended up on the phone with me, and just a lot of the different myths and range of conversation that we've even had today, where at the end of it, we just had to agree to disagree that,
Wow.
it's we just have to figure out that, we just have to agree to disagree. And
It's funny when people
uh,
comment on this stuff when they've actually never experienced it for themselves, and you can tell they've never experienced it because of
yeah,
if they did, they wouldn't be saying those things.
yeah. And just,
Yeah.
statistics off of drugs.org and,
Oh,
just all
yeah.
of these, where are you getting your information? And,
Yeah.
and part of the conversation came down to the Reagan era and being indoctrinated to a lot of this propaganda and myths that ended up happening.
Hmm.
So I think that, what you're saying is people can have these transformative peak experiences, spiritual experiences, in social and nightlife and community settings like that. And they can also, on the flip side, have very challenging healing growth, connection. We are humans, and being in connection with one another in that setting with you're talking about with art and spirit and creativity and music. What a place of incubation for these experiences, for healing. And I think, to leave it off with folks' responsibility in this is there is a responsibility of participation in that container, and caring for one another and creating that container, because in like a dynamic systems perspective, everybody, every energy, all of the histories, everything is coming into this constellation, of whatever in this constellation of experience, that everybody is bringing something to it, and everyone has a responsibility and participation, to make sure that we're creating containers, that are going to reduce the risks and just simply maximize all of the benefits, that human and life, and that this what is the word I'm trying to look for, universe, um, has to offer, and that we can harness and nurture in these very, very special and sacred, environments.
So beautifully said. Yeah. I was just hanging on to every word you were saying because, like, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head. And I'm sure any listener who has been blessed enough to have an experience like that was just nodding along with me because, yeah, that's exactly it. It is a beautiful,
Thank you.
yeah, just peak human experience. Like, what are we here for on human, and like, what are we here for as human beings on earth other than to like experience and delight in all of the senses and everything that has to offer to us? So thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. This has been absolutely incredible. Jessica, I just want to acknowledge you for being like really on the forefront and the cutting edge of destigmatization in so many directions, and for being so fearless and just authentic and unapologetic about the truths that you're sharing
Thank
with the
you.
world. And yeah, having those tough phone calls with people who just like are not there yet, right?
Hmm.
It's not easy. I know it's not easy. I also talk about like stuff on this podcast that not everyone agrees with, but we need people like
Hmm.
you to really lead this movement. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for DanceSafe and all that you do, and just the work and dedication that you've put in and that you will continue to put in. It's truly been an honor to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lana. Just really appreciate it's so immense gratitude, to be able to connect with you and connect with your listeners today, and just being able to meet everyone where they're at, and much appreciation to folks who disagree.
Right.
That only strengthens, our beliefs and solidifies in the directions that we can go on. And I just appreciate your work in this movement, in this space. And I'm looking forward to collaborating more into the future as and I really hope to see you. I hope to see you on the dance floor.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep in touch after this.
I
Yeah,
would love
it's going to
that.
be amazing. I wouldn't thank you. Thank you for what you said. And I honestly, I wouldn't be able to do it without guests such as yourself and the listeners. So, we're all, the gratitude towards me is just towards all of us. So thank you.
DanceSafe loves you, and I love you all.
Oh, yeah, I just recently got involved with, like, we don't have DanceSafe in Canada, but I'm getting involved with, I plan to in the new year start doing some harm reduction sanctuary events with our local group
Yeah.
here in Toronto. So yeah, looking to get involved with that.
Check out Anchors
Yeah.
if you haven't, and also check out uh, Stacy's org, Good Night Out Vancouver.
Okay, cool.
I know it's a little ways away, but I know that that org, Good Night Out and Stacy would probably have a ton of connections for you,
Cool.
and yeah,
Awesome.
be a good resource.
Yeah, it's so important, and it really creates such a safe space in these fun events. So, all right,
Yeah.
so let's wrap this up. So, can you just let us know where people can find you, where people can learn more about
Yeah.
DanceSafe, and also like get involved, right?
Yes. So if you can find us at dancesafe.org. You can do dancesafe.org /donate if you'd like to donate. Much love and appreciation to everyone who takes care of us, so we can take care of each other. If you want to do volunteer, the first step would be to take the volunteer training online. It just gives you a basis of knowledge. Once you go through the training, you will get connected to our outreach director, Erica, and see where there may be a chapter, depending on your location. Maybe you would like to start a chapter, and where you may be able to fit in there. We are on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We are on Instagram. Our education manager, Rachel, runs our social media. She is just outstanding and snarky and funny. So you would love our social media. Please check it out. And then personally, you can email me any questions, Jessica@dancesafe.org. And then I'm also on Instagram as well, Flying Go-Go Plata, all one word, like the MMA submission.
Amazing. I will have all of those links in the show notes, and I'll also have a link where people can purchase those test kits and fentanyl strips from DanceSafe.
Oh, yep, dancesafe.org /shop.
Got it. Cool. Thanks again, Jessica. Thank you, listeners, and we will catch you all next time. Bye.
Bye, y'all.